Welcome to this British Youth Sailing workshop on rounding windward and leeward marks. We're going to take a look at some tactical decision making and some options when you're rounding marks and which rules apply. We'll take a look at some clips that we can all learn from, and at the end there will be a quiz to test your knowledge and understanding. Many thanks to the coaches that sent in clips for me to use, and finally, enjoy. Let's take a look at a simple diagram which shows many different routes to the windward mark, and each of these routes shows you how you might end up at the windward mark. Some people ending up at the windward mark on starboard, and some ending up having to come in on port. So that often the decisions you make earlier on whilst you're sailing upwind have a great impact on where you will end up at the windward mark. Before we start looking at situations that develop at marks, let's have a look at some of the rules. So, Rule 18 covers mark room. Don't forget that the zone is 3 hull lengths of whatever boat you're sailing. And then there are 4 main rules, which are shown in the rule book: 18.1, 18.2, 18.3 and 18.4. And importantly, we need to think about who is the right-of-way boat at a mark, who is the keep clear boat, and sometimes you might be the right-of-way boat, but you have to give room. Just before we have a look at some clips and some situations, let's have a quick think about how you go about making decisions. Hopefully you'll recognise that we use a lot of visual cues. We look ahead and we see what's going on around us. There are often 3 different situations. One is a pattern match. I've been here before, I've seen it before, and I know what to do. The second is an emerging situation. Things are changing, boats are coming together, and I've got to work out what I need to do. And then the third one is I've absolutely no idea how to sort this situation out. I'm going to try something and see how it goes. Here's a classic situation, Rule 18.3. Everybody knows about this rule. Here we've got the red boat coming in on port tack, inside 3 hull lengths. We know if it tacks inside 3 hull lengths, it's going to cause the green boat on starboard and the other boats to have to head up, and the red boat will be breaking Rule 18.3. As well as that, probably cause a complete mess at the mark. So, what should the red boat have done earlier to avoid this situation occurring? Here we have a typical situation, a group of toppers sailing upwind, a group of them on port, group on starboard, the windward mark's a little bit over to the left. As the group come across on starboard, the boats on port have to duck. And then of course the boats on starboard, which haven't quite laid the windward mark yet, are having to tack. And they tack here, and then they're forced to tack again by a boat that's on the ley line. Fortunately they can get round. Now look at 176, can't actually get to the ley line, and unfortunately has to bear away, jibe off and find a new way in. I think that's happened to all of us. The question is, what could she have done earlier to avoid being in that situation? So here's another topper situation, coming into a windward mark, 269. Just manages to cross 176, remember 176 from last time, 373 rounds, 176 gets round without any trouble, and then we've got these 2 boats who actually managed to come round on port without infringing 300. Looks like there's a definite multiple infringements took place there. I'll leave the top. The next clip looks at a number of optimist sailors going round the windward mark. It's absolutely okay to come in on port tack, providing that you don't infringe anybody on starboard. And here 6289, tacks on tight on the lay so as to not infringe the boat to windward, but unfortunately hits the mark, has to do a 1-turn penalty, and then can carry on. This next clip's also optimist, and it's really important just to see the number of boats lining up on starboard tack, with a small number of boats trying to work their way in on port. As you can see, number of the boats on port having to duck in order to get around the mark. Hopefully, by the time you get to sailing at youth level, you should be pretty good at rounding marks. Here we have a group of laser radials coming to a windward mark. It's quite choppy and a fair amount of wind. You can see they've slightly overstood the mark, bearing away, adjusting the controls, and it's all very orderly. Sailors coming in on port, tacking, slightly overstood to get round the mark so that they can make a good exit. In this next clip, we're really interested to look at the ley line and what affects it. So here we're sailing on the sea, and we've got a boat on starboard tack. So it's affected by the size of the waves, the wind strength, and remember, when you're sailing on the sea, often tidal streams will have an impact on your ley line. Here, this first boat fails to make the ley line, hits the mark, fortunately gets round, will have to take a 1-turn penalty. The boat that's second jibes off, goes all the way to the back. We'll see that boat in a minute. And because everybody else is stacked up on the ley line, they're able to get around the mark. So that boat 303, which was at the mark second, unfortunately is now lying at the back of the fleet. Now here's a really interesting situation. We have a windward mark, and you can see the starboard ley line. We've got the green boat on starboard below the ley line, and the red boat on port. The red boat's ducking the green boat on starboard, and if you just think like you were playing chess 2 or 3 steps ahead, then the red boat here could end up being on the ley line on starboard, preventing the green boat from rounding the mark, and the green boat would have to duck the red boat. So the red boat's going to duck. If you were the green boat, what could you do so that you could still remain in control? Here we have a group of lasers coming in to the windward mark on starboard and port tacks. We've got red hat and white hat coming in on port, and we've got a boat coming in on the starboard ley line. Red hat, instead of tacking in front of these 2 boats, punches through and tacks. Perfectly safe manoeuvre. Then he gets his kicker off, bears away. Good job. White probably hit the mark, body pumped, needs to take a penalty. Just a couple of comments here about coming to a windward mark in shifty conditions. Difficult to judge the ley line, so coming to the ley line later will help, and overstanding just a little bit can make sure that you get round the mark. So this group of cadets doing quite a good job here. So we're going to have a look at leeward mark roundings. This diagram shows a group of boats rounding a leeward mark. The aim of a successful leeward mark rounding is to be able to either carry on, hold your lane, or to be able to tack off. Things you need to think about are what's going to drive your decision making for the next leg. Is it a shift? Is it a feature like current, a headland, or something of that nature? So things that you need to consider in your rounding. So first of all, let's have a look at some fever sailors coming to a leeward mark. They have a number of jobs. Obviously got to drop the kite. Helm and crew got to work together. Basic premises: wide in, tight out. Nice leeward mark rounding there. Able to either carry on or tack off. And this is all really quite well organised. Controlled. Everybody's thinking about what they need to do next. And here we have a classic situation of boats slowing down in order to be able to get a good rounding. So it's really good to see the fever class in control of its leeward mark roundings. Of course, we all make mistakes, and here 3373 is clear astern of the boat ahead. The boat ahead has room, but 3373 decides I'm just going to go in there anyway, and would need to take a penalty. Of course, if there's no one else in your way, wide in, tight out, sheet in, controls on, hold your height, have options. Of course, it doesn't always work out as well as it might. Here we have a group of optimists all locked together, trying to complete a leeward mark rounding. They end up in a very large raft, and about every rule in the book is broken, and people end up going for a swim as well. So, lots of rules to think about there. Think early, avoid all those problems. Here we have an interesting situation with a group of cadets. The cadet that's just about to round the mark has dropped its kite in the water, trawling for fish, and everybody else is still trying to work out how to get an efficient rounding, even though other boats got a problem. So remember, even though other boats have problems, your job is still to make a decent rounding. Let's have a look at a situation which occurs at leeward marks. Here we have the green boat which is on starboard and the blue boat which is on port. The blue boat's already entered the zone first, but it's on port tack, and the green boat's on starboard tack. So although the green boat which is on starboard is the right of way boat, in this situation it has to give the blue boat which is on port room to round the mark. So in order to be able to make good tactical decisions, you need to understand the rules. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching the clips and that you've learned something from today's workshop on windward and leeward mark roundings. It doesn't matter which class you sail, all you need to do is to look at those roundings, and there's lots to learn. Remember, every situation is different and the rules stay the same every time, but your tactical decisions change. Perhaps you could spend the next half an hour or so answering the quiz and think about how to develop your mark roundings. Well, that's it from me. Thank you.